I've got something interesting to share with you again today. It's something that's probably not new to you, but you will benefit a lot if you pay attention to it. And I will title it Let the River Flow. How to let the river flow. So in the book of John, chapter 7, verse 38, quite an interesting scripture. It says, "Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of him will flow rivers, rivers of living water." So when it talks about rivers in that scripture, what does that mean? Rivers also mean streams. Rivers also means torrent. And what is the thing about a river? We know that rivers are sources of life. Rivers are sources of what? Sustenance. Another interesting thing about rivers is that rivers can actually be used as boundaries and as obstacles. I'll explain more when I go further in the video. So, why am I talking about rivers? There is a way for the river of your life to flow, and that is by one thing: praying in tongues. Out of you will flow rivers of living water. Whoever believes in me, remember that first of all, you have to have given your life to Jesus. And then you start to pray in tongues and activate that river. So when you pray in tongues, something happens. Your purpose comes alive. You begin to see dimensions of you that you never knew existed. One of the things that happen when you pray in tongues is that what? Dreams, visions, and God's purposes for your life comes alive. Secondly, when you pray in tongues, it's not only that your dreams and your vision comes alive. Your dreams and your visions that have come alive when you pray in tongues are also sustained. In other words, they don't dry. In other words, they don't waste. In other words, they don't wither. So, praying in tongues is one principal way to drive stagnation far from you. Thirdly, when you pray in tongues, remember I talked about boundaries and obstacles. When you pray in tongues, you also create boundaries and obstacles. What will these boundaries and obstacles do? They will raise a standard against the enemy on the day of battle. They raise a standard against the enemy on the day of battle. Isaiah chapter 59 verse 19b. It says that when the enemy shall come in like a flood, that the Spirit of God will raise a standard against him. So when you pray in tongues, you open up the rivers that do what? That make your dreams, your visions, and your purpose comes alive. Number two, you sustain it. And number three, you raise a standard. You create obstacles. You shield the enemy against performing the things that he has planned to perform in your life. Kenneth Hagin of blessed memory was quoting a 19th century British and Britain leader. And he said, in his words, he says, "We must not forget that speaking in other tongues is not just an initial sign, but a continual experience for the rest of our lives." Why? He says, because it is a flowing stream that should never dry up. It was Howard Carter that made that statement. It is a flowing stream that should never dry up. So I'll conclude this video by saying that what? Praying in tongues is something that you should do for the rest of your life. Why? Because when you pray in tongues, the river flows. And when the river flows, you constantly experience the supernatural. Thank you, and God bless you.